All right, so let's kick off unit number 8. Unit 8 focuses on rational expressions. As I mentioned, a rational expression means it's a fraction. Meaning it's in the form of a fraction. Key thing about this unit, you're going to be using two different things very, very frequently. You're going to be using properties of exponents very, very frequently. And you're also going to be using factoring pretty frequently. So I made sure to put factoring in all caps because you're going to be using that a lot. Case in point, if you don't know how to factor, you got a problem. You don't know how to factor, you got a problem. So the first thing that we're going to do with a rational expression is how to simplify it. So simplifying a rational expression is just like reducing a fraction. So for example, if you had 8 over 12, you would divide the top and the bottom by 4 to reduce it. If you have expressions, you are going to have to factor it. So you factor the top and factor the bottom, and you will cancel out anything that is an exact 100% match. So in the example that's on your notes page, x minus 1 and x minus 1 are exact matches. That's why they are able to be canceled out. It has to be a dead-on match. So again, let me stress this again. We are going to be factoring a lot. So if you struggle with factoring, I expect to see you to come and get the extra help or use the video and the notes handout that I'll post to Google Classroom. But we are going to go through factoring a lot quicker now. Let's start with example 1. Example 1, we're going to simplify the expression and then determine what conditions is this expression undefined. So, when an expression is undefined, they're asking for what numbers will make the denominator equal to 0. What numbers will make the denominator equal to 0? Because as you know, you cannot divide by 0. We'll get to that part in a second. So example 1, we've got 3y, parentheses, y squared plus 4y minus 21, over y plus 7 times y squared minus 9. So the first thing that needs to be done is you need to factor. Factor everything. So we're going to factor everything. So 3y can't be factored. The next thing that's on the list is y squared plus 4y minus 21. That's an MAF problem. That becomes y plus 7 and y minus 3. Y plus 7, you can't break that down anymore. Y squared minus 9, that's difference of two squares. y plus 3, and y minus 3. So now everything is factored. Any questions so far? So again, I'm going to warn you in advance. We are going to go through factoring a lot quicker than we've done it other times during this year. This is the 4th time we've done factoring. So if you're still struggling with factoring, that now starts to enter into the realm of a personal problem, and you're going to have to start coming in and get the extra help for it. But you should know how to factor, especially greatest common factor, difference of two squares, and MAF. Those 3 should be pretty roll off the tongue at this point. So after we factor it, now we cancel out everything that is a dead-on match. So the y plus 7s match up exactly. Y minus 3 match up exactly. So that means they are going to drop out. So that's all that's left. That's your factored answer. If you can cancel it out, it's got to go. If you cancel it out, it's got to go. Questions before we continue? That is what we'll do next with this problem. So, to figure out when this expression is undefined, you take the original denominator and set it equal to 0. Take the original denominator and set it equal to 0. So you take the original denominator and you set it equal to 0. Luckily for us, we just finished factoring it, so we know what it's going to be. Y plus 7, y plus 3, y minus 3 equals 0. So you take each part, set it equal to 0. So there's 1, there's 2, there's 3 restricted values. So all 3 of these numbers are not allowed to go into that expression because they will make the denominator 0. So these 3 are called restricted values. Those are restricted values. Any questions? Example number 1. So as I mentioned, you better know how to factor. You better know how to factor if you're going to do this right. All right, example 2. So example 2, we're going to do the same thing. If example 2 looks familiar, it's because it was one of the extra credit questions on your test. It was one of the 2 extra credit questions. Well, 3 extra credit questions. There were just 2 different versions of the test. So, same rules apply. Factor it first. So the top part, that's MAF. What do you know? Bottom part, that's MAF too. So the top part, if you factor it, that's x plus 8 and x minus 5. The bottom part, if you factor it, you have 2x plus 3. 2x plus 3 and x minus 5. So both of those are MAF problems. So make sure I got my signs right. Again, those are factors. So again, if you need to review MAF, make sure you put in that time to review MAF. You got 2 parts that match. X minus 5, x minus 5. They drop. Any questions before we continue? If you're stuck somewhere, then make sure you say something. All right, so we simplified it. So now we figure out when is the expression undefined. So remember, undefined means take the original denominator, so 2x squared minus 7x minus 15, set it equal to 0. The nice part about this is we already factored it, so we know what that factoring is going to be. We know what that factor is going to be. So we set each part equal to 0. So x equals negative 3 over 2. X equals 5. Those are your restricted values. Any questions? Example 2. All right, example 3. So example 3, we have ab squared minus 5ab over 25 minus b squared. So we're still going to simplify. So before we start simplifying, let's make sure everything is in standard form. So we're going to take 25 minus b squared and rewrite it. So we have negative b squared plus 25. So this bottom part notice that the bottom part begins with a negative. Begins with a negative. So if the expression begins with a negative, we're going to divide out -1 first. We're going to divide out -1 first. Why? Because you don't want your first expression to be negative. You don't want the first expression to be negative. So we're going to divide out -1. So that gives you a b squared minus 5ab. If you divide out -1, now you have b squared minus 25. So if you see that your expression begins with a negative, divide out -1 first. Do it now, you save yourself the headache later. Any questions before we continue? All right, then let's factor it. So the top part, we can greatest common factor that. Take out AB, you're left with B minus 5. The bottom part, that's the difference of 2 squares. Oh, look at here. Something matched. They drop. You have AB over -1, B plus 5. And that's simplified. Any questions? Anywhere you're confused? Anywhere you're stuck? Do not wait until you have a quiz to then ask, I'm stuck. How did you do this? You can't. You don't ask when there's a quiz. It's too late at that point. Cool. It must be all good. That's simplified. Now we find the undefined values. So undefined means scroll this up. So undefined means take the original denominator and set it equal to 0. So your original denominator was 25 minus b squared. So we rewrote that as -1 negative b squared plus 25 factored out for -1. And then we had made it -1, b plus 5, and b minus 5. So take every part and set it equal to 0. -1 equals 0 makes absolutely no sense. B plus 5 equals 0 means that b equals -5. B minus 5 equals 0. B equals +5. So there's your restricted values. B equals -5 and b equals 5. Any questions? Example 3. So you picked up a new trick. If the expression begins with a negative, divide out -1 first. Any questions before we press on? And if it's not hard right now, good. I'm glad. That's what I want. That's what I hope. If you're struggling, don't wait until the night before the homework's due or the night before a quiz to then try to ask, oh, wait, how do you do this? It's too late to ask at that point. But wait till last minute. So we simplified 1. Now let's start our operations. So the 2 that we're going to worry about today are multiplying and dividing. So multiplying and dividing are not brand new. These are not brand new concepts. So multiplying, you add 3/5 times 4/9. Multiplying means you multiply from left to right. 3 times 4, 5 times 9, 12/45, and you can reduce it. Now, some of you learned either in 8th grade, 7th grade, early high school to cross cancel. Okay, cross cancel. 3 and 9 can be cross canceled. 3 becomes 1, 9 becomes a 3. 1 times 4 is 4, 5 times 3 is 15. Still get the same answer. So if you want to cross cancel, be my guest. Want to cross cancel, be my guest. I have no problem with that. It's not going to be that simple all the time, but if you can make it work, make it work. Division. So if you're doing 2/3 divided by 4/15. So remember, dividing fractions is when you keep the first fraction, change division to multiplication, and then we flip the second fraction. The good old keep, change, flip. Good old keep, change, flip. Then we simplify. 2 and 4, 2 becomes 1, 4 becomes 2, 3 becomes 1, 15 becomes 5. You get 5 over 2. So multiplying and dividing with numbers, when we bring variables into it, we're doing the exact same thing. Same thing. Only difference, now you're dealing with variables. Now we're dealing with variables which can be a little bit more complex. Any questions before we kick off multiplying? All right, let's kick off multiplying. So for multiplying, so we have 6c over 5d times 15cd squared over 8a. For multiplying, you're multiplying straight across. Multiply from left to right. So 6 times 15, so we have 90c squared, d squared, over 5 times 8, 40a d. Multiply from left to right, now we need to reduce. Now it's a reducing problem. 90 and 40, I can divide both of those by 10. 9 over 4. C squared, there are no other C's. Leave it. A, there are no other A's. Leave it. D squared over D. Remember the properties of exponents. If you're dividing and the bases are the same, keep the base and subtract the exponents. 2 minus 1 is 1. There's your simplified answer. So properties of exponents, not going anywhere either. And it's okay to need to review if you need to review. It's not okay to just say, well, I'm just not going to do it because I don't forgot how to do it. Yeah, that's out. Any questions, example 4? And for those of you who find yourselves getting kicked out a lot, don't worry. This will get uploaded to Google Classroom, so you won't miss anything. All right, example 5. So in the case of example 5, we have a little bit more work to do with that. You got 4 polynomials. So for each of these polynomials, you're going to have to factor. You're going to have to factor each and every one of them. So at the top, it's an MAF problem. So remember that's your multiply is -12, adds to 1. So there's only 2 numbers that will do that. And we got to divide by the 2. X plus 2, 2x minus 3. That's the top. Move on to the bottom. We began with a negative, so that means we take out the negative. And then after we take out the negative, then we do MAF. Multiplies -5, adds up to 4. So that gives us 5, -1. If you get stuck somewhere, don't wait till AC. You can ask right now. You get it over with. So that's factor. The next part of the problem. First thing, everything had next. So you got to take out next. Now that you took out next, greatest common factor, then you use MAF. Multiplies the 2, add to -3. So there's only one combination that's going to work there. Bottom part, that's just basic greatest common factor. Take out a 2x. So now everything is factored. If it took a little bit of time, that's okay. Let me tell you this way, punch on. You mess up on one thing of factoring, that's going to train wreck the rest of the problem. You mess up one part of the factoring, it's going to train wreck everything else. Again, would you rather do it right, or would you rather do it over? So now let's find some matching parts. X minus 1 and x minus 1. So we can cross cancel those. 2x minus 3, 2x minus 3. We can cross cancel those. X and x. We can get rid of those too. So we've got 3 pairs of things that are dropping out. We've got 3 sets of things to drop out. That's -1 times 2, -2, and then x plus 5. Yeah, problems up. Second. And I know some of y'all were done with that problem already. Why? Because you got it like that. But you gotta know how to factor. Any questions, 4 or 5? And let's finish up with dividing. Complex fractions. We'll spend the first part of Monday. Not Monday, Thursday. So 6 and 7. So here's the warning that I will give you. For division, you need to change to multiplication first. Change it to multiplication first before you do anything. So, for example 6, we keep the first fraction. Keep the first fraction. Change division to multiplication. And then we flip the second fraction. Keep, change, flip. Once we keep, change, flip, now we can do some work. Now we can do some work. So let's do a little work. 18 times 35 is 630. X doesn't have anything to multiply with. Neither does y to the third. Neither does the a. Neither does a squared. And neither does b. Everything else just comes up. It's going to force you to pay attention to what you're doing. 7 times 12 is 84. A squared, b squared, x squared, and y. Any questions before we continue? Now we're going to reduce. 630 and 84, you can divide the top and the bottom by 42. Trust me, I'm not a genius. I did this in first period, so I know that that number works. So you have x and x squared. So 2 minus 1 is 1. X goes at the bottom. Y to the third and y. Y squared. A squared and a squared. Dead on match. They drop. B and b squared. You would be at the bottom. So there's your simplified answer. Or you can always put it in alphabetical order. I don't care which way you give it. The way is fine with me. Any questions before we do the last example? Good. Example 7. Last example we're doing today. It's a division problem, but we got this new thing that just came out of nowhere. This thing raised to the -1 power. So this is another way to represent a reciprocal. That's just another way to represent a reciprocal. So that means we're going to flip the fraction over. We're going to flip the fraction over. That's all that means. So your problem is actually x squared minus 16 over 2y plus 36 divided by everything on the right-hand side. Yeah, you don't know necessarily what to do with it until you're told what to do with it. Now you know what to do with it. So now it's time to do keep, change, flip. Keep your first fraction. Change division to multiplication. Flip the second fraction. Keep, change, flip. Now we go through all of the factoring that has to happen. So x squared minus 16, that's the difference of two squares. Two y plus 36, that's just regular various common factor. Y squared minus 3y minus 18. That's an MAF problem. X squared minus 12x plus 32. That's an MAF problem. So now everything is factored. Since everything is factored, you can now start canceling stuff out. But you only really get one thing to cancel out. So, if you get to this point and you find it only, you don't get a lot to cancel out, or nothing cancels out, don't start thinking that you did something wrong. You may very well have solved out the problem correctly. The only difference is you just don't get anything to cancel out. It'd be like that sometimes. As long as you factored everything correctly, then you're all good. But you need to make sure you factored everything correctly. That's x plus 4, y minus 6, y plus 3, over 2, y plus 18, and x minus 8. So nothing dropped out. It'd be like that sometimes. Nothing wrong with that, you'll be all right. Any questions, 6 or 7? Before we get ready to call it Tuesday. So, if anything, you better know how to factor. If you don't know how to factor, this unit is going to suck. There's about no other way I can tell you about it. So